has been shown, which is that omega-3 fatty acids slow biological aging. And what I mean about that is, we all of us sitting in this room, we're born, we have our birthday, we have our age, right? So I'm 47 and a half. And, that's my chronological age. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you look at the age of the cells in my organs, in my blood, in my liver, that they're going to look 47 years old, depending on a variety of both genetic but also lifestyle factors. Importantly, your cells in your body can actually be either much younger or much older than your chronological age, and it really depends on how you're living your life. And so biological age, typically we measure this through epigenetic aging, and these epigenetic aging clocks were developed by Dr. Steve Horvath when he was at UCLA, and there's a variety of different clocks that are used. There's the DNA grim age, the DNA pheno age, and those are two of the major ones, and then there's some other ones as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about these epigenetic clocks, and what these are essentially just looking at DNA methylation patterns. And these methylation patterns are exactly that. They're a pattern that change with age, and the changing of these patterns really seems to be a precursor to the phenotype of aging and to the outcomes of aging, right? So the phenotype being frail, having diseases, and then the outcomes, dying from cardiovascular disease, dying from cancer, right? So the epigenetic aging clocks are very sensitive to the molecular events that are causing aging, and that's why we can measure these clocks and make an estimation about what our biological age is. So one of the first studies here, this was in 2019, showed that omega-3 does slow biological aging. This was a prospective study looking at people that basically reported their omega-3 intake, and the DNA grim age clock was used in this study. And the DNA grim age clock is a very, very accurate clock that can predict when someone is going to die. It predicts like your time to death, basically. And what it was found is that people with a higher omega-3 intake slowed their age acceleration. So you're accelerating, your aging is happening at a certain rate. If you're smoking, it's happening at an accelerated rate. If you're taking omega-3, it's slowing that rate of acceleration. So it's slowing age acceleration. Study that actually was published pretty recently in 2024. This study also looked at omega-3 intake, both dietary, supplemental intake, and found that omega-3 did slow biological aging, and it really mattered, the dose really mattered, and this was based on gender. So for women, it took about at least 1 gram of omega-3 to start to slow biological aging in women, whereas for men, it actually happened at a lower dose. It happened at around 461 milligrams a day. So it seems like men must have more inflammation going on, because they seem to be able to have an effect even at a lower dose. But this is really interesting, because you see, like, once you hit that 1 gram mark, that dotted line, this is age acceleration. You see that it slows, right? You're slowing your age acceleration after that 1 gram mark for women, and then a little bit sooner than that for men. Yeah, but what I'm even more excited about is the randomized controlled trial, because that really is, it gets rid of the confounding factors, because at the end of the day, a correlation study is just that. You're correlating things, and you try to, take into account all the potential other confounding factors. But when you have a randomized controlled trial, then you can really definitively say this is actually slowing aging. And so what this trial did was this was in Switzerland. And these people were very healthy to start. So I'll say this. Epigenetic aging wasn't found to be slowed by vitamin D alone, which other studies, starting with vitamin D deficient populations, have found that vitamin D supplementation does slow it. In this study, they only took 2,000 IUs a day. If you're deficient, it takes about 4,000 IUs a day to bring you up to a sufficient status. So in this study, they didn't see any effect on slowing of biological aging in the vitamin D group. Exercise alone, so this exercise was resistance training. It was 30 minutes of resistance training 3 days a week. Keep in mind that 90% of the participants in Switzerland at the start of this study were already physically active, which is outrageous. So these are clearly physically active people. These are healthy adults, okay? You'd never find that in the United States. But they were already physically active, so there really wasn't much slowing of epigenetic aging after they're already being physically active, adding, the resistance training on top of that. But adding the omega-3 alone did slow epigenetic aging in this population. So this was the only thing that really had a profound effect. But what was really fascinating is that there was synergy. So when you looked at omega-3 plus vitamin D, it slowed epigenetic aging even further than just omega-3 alone. It slowed it by about 3.3 months. When you looked at all three combined, resistance training, omega-3, and vitamin D, it slowed it by about 3.8 months. So really, it was like these healthy lifestyle factors converging, with omega-3 being the thing that's really moving the lever. And you might look at me and go, well, Rhonda, 3.8 months, what does that mean? Like doesn't matter. I'm not talking about extending your life expectancy by 3.8 months. I'm talking about slowing aging. So we're talking about a cumulative effect, right? This is going to keep compounding year after year. And what I love about this study is they looked at that. So the 3.8 months of epigenetic aging slowing, that was the combined omega-3, vitamin D, and strength training. That also reduced pre-frailty by 40%. So even though it was only about a 4-month slowing of epigenetic aging, it reduced frailty by 40%, and it reduced invasive cancer by 61%. Wow, exactly. This is pretty exceptional. The omega-3 alone, without any other, vitamin D or resistance training, reduced infections by 13%, and it decreased falls by 13%. So the point I want to make here is that I know Steve Horvath, who developed these epigenetic aging clocks, over a decade ago. He's a friend of mine. I talked to him the other day about this. I was so excited about this data. He says that these epigenetic aging clocks are very sensitive to inflammation. In fact, it's one of the things that really accelerates the aging process, inflammation. And we know that omega-3 is, as I mentioned, it has very powerful anti-inflammatory effects. I talked about resolving inflammation. EPA also can sort of directly affect inflammation through the leukotrienes and the prostaglandins. It can reduce a little bit of those as well. So the fact that omega-3 is really having a profound effect on biological aging, in my mind, is very important. We know we have the omega-3 index data, and we know the outcomes are also affected. We know cardiovascular death, is lower. We know that you're increasing life expectancy. And here we have, in real time, it's actually slowing the aging process. So this trial, by the way, was a 2-year trial. So I think that it's really important to keep in mind that you can have an outsized effect by something as little as, in this study, taking, let's see, what was the dose? In this study, the dose was 1 gram. It was 1 gram. Little as 1 gram a day had an effect on slowing aging. That's pretty profound. And so, as I mentioned, these epigenetic clocks are very sensitive to inflammation, and inflammation is at the core of aging. This is known. It is really, really one of the, I would say, molecular processes that is driving all these hallmarks of aging. It is driving, damage to your DNA that leads to cancer. It's driving damage to proteins that's leading to them aggregating and not being degraded. And you're getting these aggregates in your brain leading to Alzheimer's disease, and in your cardiovascular system leading to cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis. It is fundamentally driving cancer. Inflammation is at the heart of cancer. It's really at the core of every age-related disease. And we now know it's literally just accelerating the way our DNA is changing with time, right? This is the epigenetic clock data. It's really just at the fundamental level changing our DNA and accelerating that. And so, I remember there was a study that was published, about 10 years ago. This was out of Japan. And in Japan, they have a high percentage of these centenarians, people that live to be 100, and the super centenarians, this is people that live to be 105, and also the super centenarians, that would be 110. And this Japanese study looked at, all these biomarkers to see, if I look at older adults, if I look at the centenarians and the and the super centenarians, like what sort of patterns arise? What can I tell from these biomarkers that's going to predict whether or not they're going to live to be, the next stage? And the only thing that was able to predict whether or not someone was going to go from being an older adult to someone that lives to be 100, and someone that lives to be 100 to 105, and so on, was suppressing inflammation. Nothing else predicted it, not low blood glucose, not lipids, not kidney function, liver function. Nothing else predicted it except for the ability to suppress inflammation. And not only did that predict the ability to live to the next, 105 or 110 being really old, but it also predicted cognitive function. So people were more cognitively aware and they didn't have neurodegenerative disease as well if they were able to have low inflammation. And again, omega-3 fatty acids are doing just that. They're suppressing inflammation. They're resolving inflammation. They're doing it through a variety of mechanisms. They have these specialized pro-resolving mediators that are really keeping the immune response in check. And that is important because our immune system is getting activated every day. We're being exposed to all kinds of things, in addition to pathogens when you want it to be activated. I mean, just air pollution that we're breathing in constantly right now. Just normal, diet. You try to eat as healthy as you can. Inflammation is being generated in the gut. It's constantly being generated. And so you really want to have something that keeps that in check. It also plays a role in increasing the cellular cleanup inside of ourselves, autophagy. And that is also very important for aging, as well as helping reprogram cells.